I think what's important to understand about the space, I think both the venture capital and the enterprise development space, is there's a major role for both government and private sector to play. And I think that often when you get a breakdown in almost whose responsibility is what, is when you get a stalemate in spaces like this. I think that government certainly has done a lot in the VC enterprise development space. They've created incentives. For those of you who aren't familiar with the BE scorecard, there is the incentive under enterprise development to invest into the space. And they've created a number of other incentives which I don't think many people are even aware of, some not necessarily that well marketed. So there is Section 12J in the Tax Act as an example, which looks to give individuals a tax break for investing in small businesses. Another thing which government are doing. And then there are a number of sector-specific incentives that the DTI have put out to try and drive this behavior around investing in small businesses. There's also the well-publicized Jobs Fund. And I think that it's a very difficult thing to understand, conceptualize, and then implement a fund of that size, 9 billion, in a way that tangibly is set up to be successful in this SME space, and you have the right skills and conduits to do it. But certainly the DBSA, who have been given that mandate, are also trying to do a lot of work in that space. I think that all of these are good public sector driven incentives, and I think there is a lot of tailwind helping the sector. I think at the same time there's a lot of really good intent in the private sector space, and I mean you only need to look at what SAB are doing with their Kickstart program, with their supply development program, and what Sasol are doing with Siyaka, and which is a supplier development fund, and a number of the other initiatives that come out of Chem City, and what Anglo are doing with Anglo Zimele, to understand that there are a number of corporates who really think more than just the letter of the codes and really embrace the spirit of the codes as well. But for me, the crux of all of this is actually getting the two sides to speak to each other, because I think there's a lot of good intent on both sides. And I think often they miss each other, and that is when people get disillusioned about doing initiatives which then don't count for points, whereas they are certainly in line with the spirit of the codes. And likewise, where government feel that there are initiatives that are going on that, although they're ticking the box, aren't necessarily helping them unlock this really major problem which they're dealing with around small business and entrepreneurship development. So I think that communication's key, and almost the conduit for that is an understanding of the space and best practice and what works in the space. And I think from an Edge perspective, we are always trying to go to conferences. Tomorrow I'm off to Limpopo to speak to government there to try and help them understand what is best practice, because often what looks to be best practice in the space isn't best practice. And that's talks to the fact that what's socially and politically the right thing to do doesn't necessarily need to always be implemented using social and political mandates or social and political incentives, but rather using management and commercial best practice.